So moments ago, President Biden arrived at 10 Downing Street in London, where he was met at the door by United Kingdom Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. President Biden is holding meetings in the morning with the PM ahead of a trip to Windsor Castle this afternoon. While there, he will meet with the newly crowned King Charles for the first time since he ascended the throne. This afternoon, the two will participate in a climate engagement at the castle before President Biden leaves for the NATO summit beginning tomorrow in Lithuania.
Let's go to London right now. We'd get the host way too early, Jonathan Lemire, also White House bureau chief at Politico. He is, of course, at Buckingham Palace to talk about the Boston Red Sox 5-game winning streak and the fact they're only 1 game behind the Yankees going to the All-Star break and only 2 games behind in the wild card chase. What say the new king, Jonathan Lemire? And also, secondly, talk about the meeting between the president and the prime minister. This is going to be their 6th meeting in 6 months. Obviously, NATO membership at the forefront. And then, of course, King Charles III. Always, his focus has always been on the environment. We just endured 3-4 of the hottest days in history of the world since it's been recorded. Yeah. That obviously has to be on the front of many people's minds there.
Good morning, guys. I'm coming to you live from the official Caddy K position for Morning Joe at the Canada Gate of Buckingham Palace. In fact, the changing of the guard happening just over my shoulder as we speak. This is indeed the president's first day here in Europe. I traveled with him last night on Air Force One here. As you saw, he just arrived at number 10 to meet with Rishi Sunak, their 6th meeting in as many months. Certainly the war in Ukraine is part of today's conversation. There is a difference of opinion on those cluster bombs. The U.S. has signed off on sending those munitions to Ukraine as part of the war effort. The UK is one of the countries who's signed a treaty that prevents doing that. But aides tell me they don't think that will be a major flashpoint of tension there. As you mentioned, the president will then meet with the king later today. The King Charles is certainly environmental issues. Climate change has always been at the forefront of his public agenda. The president is going to use that meeting today to try to create a public-private partnership to help on those issues. And the two men, I'm told, have a bit of a kinship. Both have waited a long time to ascend to the most powerful position in their country and have warm relations from their previous meetings on the international stage. But you're right, Joe. Certainly, this is all just a prelude to the NATO summit in Lithuania. Ukraine not expected to gain admission to the alliance anytime soon, but that will be a topic of conversation, as will be Sweden. We can dive into all of that, as well as the #1 topic on both sides of the pond, those surging Boston Red Sox, as we head into the break, looking perhaps to make that wild card run. Yeah, surprisingly so, Mika, frankly.
Yeah, it really surprisingly so. King Charles III, of course, after talking about the environment, is going to turn to the president and say, buy or sell.
No.
Buy or sell.
No.
What should the Sox do? A trade deadline, of course, you'll be there every second while that's breaking, and please keep us informed. We'll be coming back to you often on that. David Ignatius, of course, you spent many years talking to Dr. Brzezinski about Ukraine. It was an obsession of his for decades. And you all talked about it at length, the possibility of Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. Obviously, the president says they can't right now because that would mean war with Russia, which they're trying to avoid. But let's talk about that. But also, I think right now more relevant because it's more possible, the fact that you have Turkey standing in the way of Sweden, who would be a forceful, important, powerful member of NATO as an addition. Talk about the possibility of Joe Biden possibly making progress on getting Sweden into the NATO alliance.
So, Joe, I had an unusual opportunity to walk through each of these key issues that will be facing President Biden when he lands tomorrow in Vilnius with his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, on Friday. He had a small group of us by in auspicious, somewhat ominous rooms, the Secretary of War's rooms in the old executive office building to talk about these issues. So first, on the question of the NATO summit and the big issue before it, the president has made clear that he doesn't think this is the time to admit NATO. Admitting a country that's at war with Russia to NATO would perhaps imply that NATO should immediately come to that country's aid with the full commitment, Article 5, a pledge to use nuclear weapons. And neither Biden nor most NATO members are ready to do that. Some countries, the Baltic countries, Poland, want a timetable. Okay, you can't come now, but let's give Ukraine a timetable for when they can join. Again, Biden is reluctant, as is Germany. Then you have the question of Sweden's membership. NATO is on the way to being the strongest alliance it's ever been, arguably one of the strongest in world history. But Turkey has been blocking Sweden's accession. I was assured by the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, that these problems with Turkey are being resolved. It's notable that President Biden called Erdogan, the president of Turkey, on Sunday. He's going to meet him in Vilnius on Tuesday. And there's a feeling that this is going to be worked out. It may be worked out this week, but if not this week, soon. So there's a general feeling that the big issues, although there'll be some signs of controversy, basically are understood on all sides. The key, I would just conclude, is how does NATO come out of this summit with a real sense that it has a strategy not simply for sustaining Kyiv as long as it takes, but for winning. Russia is weak now. Russia's in disarray. If ever there was a moment to really have a strategy, have a push to get to a different status for Ukraine, a victory in this conflict, it's right now.